It's now past. I'd like to welcome everybody along to the Planning Applications Committee meeting on Tuesday the 18th of April 2017. Could I make sure that everyone's got their mobile phones switched off or on silent, and the note that this meeting may be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. Lucy, could you confirm the Sederunt?
Good morning, everyone. We have 13 members present. We are quorate. And so far, I have apologies from Councillor Diggle and Councillor Groom. Councillor Blake has advised that he will be along later in the meeting. Not present are Councillor Ian Crothers. We have 14 members present. Councillor Gilroy, Councillor McGregor, Councillor Ogilvie. They will be along later in the meeting.
Thank you, Lucy.
Apologies for Councillor Ogilvie. Yeah.
Noted, thanks.
Have we got any declarations of interest? Jane?
Yes, Chairman, I declare an interest in item number 4 by virtue of financial and familial interest, and I will be leaving the meeting.
Thanks, Jane. Ivor?
Chair, it's the same interest that declared the last time in item 4. There is a far out relation there, but I think the relationship's far enough away that it doesn't affect my judgment. I'll be staying.
Thanks, Ivor. Right. We confirm the minutes of the previous meeting and agree the amendments. Lucy, could you outline the procedures to be followed?
The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn, as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee. Such members should withdraw from the committee chamber after making their presentation. Applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session, and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application, or, where appropriate, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will determine the application.
Thank you, Lucy. We go on to item 4 on the agenda, one that was deferred for a site visit. It's at Dumfries and Galloway College site, Herries Avenue, Heathhall, Dumfries. Erection of 75 dwelling houses, construction of roads, drainage, formation of landscaping and open space, application for approval of matters specified in conditions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 18 of planning permission in principle 13/P/3/0 362 15/B/3/0513. And we've got Chris McTeer talking to this one. Could he? Aye, could he? I know, I've just got to ask Lucy to tell members who are entitled to, could you do the limits entitled to vote, Lucy?
Okay, in relation to this item, Councillor Martin, Councillor Dempster, Councillor Ian Crothers, Councillor Dick, Councillor Dryborough, Councillor Geddes, Councillor Hislop, Councillor McCroftry, Councillor McComb, Councillor McKee, Councillor Syme and Councillor Thompson are all eligible to take part in this item.
Got Chris McTeer speaking this one. You just want to run through the slides and that again, Chris?
Thank you, Chair. This application was considered by the committee at its last meeting on the 23rd of March, where the committee resolved to defer the application for a site visit. This took place on the 5th of April, and a register of the attendees of the site visits available online. Members of the committee met at the site with officers from the Planning Service and Environmental Health, and with a number of objectors too, and we walked the perimeter boundary with Catherine Field Industrial Estate. Turning to the application back in front of us today, this is for the erection of 75 dwelling houses on the site of the former Dumfries and Galloway College in Heathhall. As the Chair mentioned, the application site has in principle planning permission for a residential development, and this application is for the approval of matters specified in the parent consents conditions. The site also is designated as an allocated housing site within the adopted local development plan. Turning to the detail of the conditions, this application seeks approval for matters specified in conditions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 18, which relate to layout, design, external appearance, landscaping, noise assessment, affordable housing, details of boundary fencing and details of junction improvement works on Herries Avenue. Conditions 2 to 5 are standard detailed matters conditions required as part of a further application, and the layout comprises of 75 dwellings arranged roughly within 3 blocks, separated by the 2 new entranceways from Herries Avenue. Open space, as you can see from the slide here, within the site includes extends approximately 4,500 square metres, and this will contain an equipped children's play area, planting and footpath connections into future phases of the site. Just run through a couple of picture slides here showing the northern access and the southern access there, and across the site from Herries Avenue. The new road accesses into the site will be full 5.5 metre wide carriageways with footpaths and connecting roads, and these are being used as pinch points within the site, and other additional pinch points will be created by on-street tree planting and visitor parking and shared surfaces, which will reduce traffic speeds and provide a permeability of movement within the site in line with the government's designing streets principles. Condition 6 of the parent PIP requires a noise assessment to be submitted in respect of the detailed layout relative to Catherine Field Industrial Estate, and should include suitable acoustic attenuation measures. The applicant's submitted noise report recommends an earth bund of 4.7 metres in height and topped by a 1.8 metre acoustic fence running along the southern boundary of the site adjacent to Catherine Field Industrial Estate. This was considered to be sufficiently robust enough to create a residential environment, and you can see the extent of the acoustic barrier on the slide there. The Council's Environmental Health Service were also consulted to obtain an impartial view of the submitted noise information, and they offered no objections to the scheme. And that's just a cross-section of the earth bund with a timber crib wall at the front and the acoustic fence on the top. Condition 7 of the PIP requires at least 25% of the total units on site for the purposes of affordable housing unless otherwise agreed. Following the adoption in 2014 of the new local development plan and the Council's updated local housing strategy, the requirement for affordable housing has been revised to 20%, and in this instance the 15 units from the 75 that you can see indicated here have been allocated as affordable housing, and these will be provided on site by Dumfries and Galloway Housing Partnership. Condition 8 requires details of a secure boundary fence or other enclosure to be approved prior to commencement of development, and this is shown in yellow along the southern site boundary. and consists of a 2-metre high mesh anti-climb fence. Condition 18 requires the submission of details of junction improvement works at the southern site junction on Herries Avenue, and the council's internal road service have been consulted on this arrangement, and they're happy that the required technical standards have been met. Oh, yeah, that's it, thanks, David. In conclusion, the proposal is considered to be compliant with the provisions of the Council's adopted development plan, and it's recommended that for the reasons outlined in the report that this application is approved subject to the conditions listed on pages 34 and 35 of your committee papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Members? Ian?
Could I just ask a question with regards to the bond? Is it the intention, the developer to do, or the council or whoever, to do further noise checks once that's been erected?
The long-term plans for the site, if the first phase is approved, once the bond is in, is to install noise monitoring equipment, which will give a sort of a larger background of noise information, which would then help with the design of the next phase and the position of the houses relative to that.
But will that take place before the building starts, though? That's what I'm getting at.
No, the bond and the first phase of housing would come through because the housing's only in the western portion of the overall site. So it was intended that once that housing was built, then noise monitoring equipment would go in after that to monitor noise as attenuated by the bond.
Archie?
Thanks very much, Chair. It was actually useful going out onto the site visit. My understanding, of course, was that the bond was actually going to be going in prior to any building actually happening, and that's news to me. That would give me some serious concern that if the bond hadn't been in place before the houses were built, then how then do we, we need to get this right first. I think I don't have a problem with the houses going in, but the noise, certainly as the objectors have said at the past meeting, is an issue for them because they're actually on the site, and if they get complaints later on when houses are actually built, then what can they do about it? Now, my understanding, can we first of all condition that the bond is put in place prior to any building going on? My other concern is that the 20% social housing is closest to the noise. And is that fair to people who will have rented accommodation rather than bought accommodation? Not that it's a planning matter, but it's certainly something that I've got concerns about. I'll hear other members first here before I come back.
Chris?
Sorry, just to clarify, I thought we were talking about the noise monitoring equipment. The bond is to go in before the housing. Sorry, I wasn't clear with that.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. As a Class 5 industrial area, would the factory owner of Logoplast be at liberty to place the silos at the west end of the factory rather than where they currently are?
I mean, any further development out with the application site would be. I mean, if it needed consent, it would be looked at on its own merits. But it's difficult to say for certain whether it would need planning permission or not to put on additional silos without checking the permitted development rights for the factory itself. But any future scenario like that would be dealt with on its own merits at the time.
Again?
I take it from that answer, you're saying they would not have an automatic right to place the silos where they wish.
In terms of the silos, I mean, basically what Chris was saying is that they may or may not require grant of planning permission. We would need to see the exact dimensions and location of them. It might require planning permission. Indeed, I understand the silos which are there at the moment probably required but haven't actually obtained, probably immune from action now. But yes, in a similar circumstance, if there was a different proposal for additional silos, then we would have to check that very carefully against the permitted development rights. And if it required planning permission, then there would be an element of control as to where they could go.
But I think the further away you move them from where they really need it, you could actually create more noise blowing the chip than what you would do if they're nearer the site. That's just way I can know that way working in the plastics industry for 30 years.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. You'll recollect that just before the last meeting adjourned, sir, I expressed my concerns, as it were, having listened to the various submissions and the various points being put forward by the objectors. And I went on the site visit. It was well worth doing so, albeit that the noise, as my view, we had the wind blowing, as it were, across the site from, I would have suggested, northwest. And I suspect that had it been blowing the prevailing direction, southwest, we would have heard, even more of the noise from the adjoining Class 5 estate. I have very real concerns about this, sir. I'll make no apology for saying so. I think, having gone through the report, having been in the site visit, having listened to the various submissions, I personally feel that I am with the objectors on this issue. I think that the points that they're making are valid. They're well made. It's not a case of over-egging the pudding. I think there's a very real concern here that if we don't get this right, either the estate, Class 5 estate, which employs a significant number of people, may very well suffer with all that that implies in the future, or alternatively, at the end of the day, people who are being left to live in these houses, whether it's affordable housing provided by the RSL or whatever, may very well also have difficulties in being expected to do so. One of the points that was made, Chair, on the visit, I think the question was put to one of the objectors, and it was claimed, in fact, and we've already mentioned the bund, that I think it was almost 20 houses, it was suggested, would not necessarily be protected, as it were, by the bund being positioned where it's being proposed. Now, I'll leave that. I would like clarification on that. But the big issue, as far as I'm concerned, sir, is I am not anti-housing, not at all. But I personally feel that what we should be seeking here is a much bigger and a much more robust buffer zone to make sure, in fact, that if we are going ahead with development, that neither side suffers. This should not be a case of economic well-being and economic development, Chair, at the expense of housing or vice versa. And I think we would be failing in a planning committee, if we allowed it to come to that. But I personally feel that we should be looking seriously at a much more robust and much more meaningful buffer zone to ensure, insofar as we possibly can, that we mitigate against the possible noise issues and we allow the adjoining proprietors in the Class 5 estate to go on and hopefully expand in the future and enhance the economic well-being of that part of Dumfries and further afield. I won't move formally at the moment, but as I say, I'd be interested to hear what colleagues think.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the back of what Alistair's saying, if this committee is minded to approve this application, currently we have an assessment, a noise assessment, which may or may not be absolutely accurate. Are we in a position to put a condition on any approval that if it becomes apparent that there is a noise issue still prevalent on this development site, that we can add additional measures to make sure that in the long term any business is no compromised by noise when we've maybe our assessment is as accurate as we would have liked. And the other thing I would have to say, in response to Councillor Dryborough's view, if it's perceived that the houses nearest the factory units are in the poorest location, it shouldn't be that it falls to social housing. And I thought the new council policy was a mix of social and owner-occupied, so you didn't identify a particular area that was social housing, and it'd be a random a portion social housing, but still coming to the 20%. And I would be hoping that could somehow be encapsulated in any decision we make if we're in a mind to approve this application.
Just on the noise, Richard, could you give any comments on what's been said about the noise and the bund, etc.?
Is that working? We've looked at the noise. We've looked at the noise protected values at the nearest houses with the barrier in place. We feel that the design that's there is acceptable, which is why we haven't objected, including future expansion and the silos being located where they are. We have considered all these things when we made our recommendation to planning.
Would it be possible for alterations to made to this if it was still the noise was unacceptable after it's in?
Well, one of the things we'd suggested at in the report to in the planning department was we'd mentioned the possibility of acoustic glazing and acoustic ventilation. Now, obviously, that depended on whether the developer was wanting it. We didn't feel it was necessary, but it could be put in as an additional protection, just to try and help people, without trying to design their scheme. But it's an option that can be done to provide additional protection.
Whilst Richard's correct in what he's saying from a environmental health perspective, that there are methods that can be done as a retrofitting, from a planning perspective, we would really need to consider that at this stage, because this is the application for the houses. And I'm not aware of a mechanism of having conditions that you can require things to be added on afterwards if there is a problem. We really have to assess what has been put before us and whether or not it's acceptable. And that's what's been done, as Richard's concerned, from an environmental health perspective. They have looked at this and felt it wasn't necessary. So I certainly can't think of a competent planning condition mechanism to actually require a retrofitting. If there was proven to be a noise nuisance, then that's a different matter. But I just can't think of a condition way of doing that. I don't know if Robert or Chris viewed the same view. Yeah.
Thanks, David. Ivor?
Chair, when I went, I must admit, I took the opportunity to sort of go behind the building that was in line with the silos when they were being filled, and it was noticeable that there was a definite reduction in noise there. I'm not sure technically whether the wall would reduce that noise or the bund would reduce that noise more because of the way it's designed to absorb sound, or whether the building would do the same job. Possibly coming from a sort of agricultural background, I didn't actually think the noise of the silos getting filled was that bad compared to the likes of a animal feed bin being filled with cattle feed. It could be double the noise, I would have thought. And it was noticeable there was a sound monitor on site, and it was something like it went up 40 decibels with the slamming of a lorry door from, I think it was 50 odd to about 90 odd. The actual noise, I would say, or the most noisy thing I felt was the wind that day. My big concern is if we put the housing in and the bund in and there is a noise, can we then go back if the second phase or the third phase and then impose a condition on those two phases? Because where the houses are just now, they're, I would say, at the furthest point from the actual noise source. But if we were to then put other phases in there, can we then revisit those phases and put different conditions on for sound? Because if it's a case of we can't, I would have concerns about the houses as they move closer towards the silos and the buildings further down, just the way the wind would be blowing. And when you did get, I walked further away from the building, once you do get into a direct line of sight of the towers, the noise did go back up. But when you're hidden behind the actual building, there was a definite reduction in sound. So if you are starting to move into phase 2, 3, I'd rather see some sort of condition when they come forward that we could revisit.
Certainly my understanding of the situation is it's phased for exactly that purpose, to allow from the westernmost part, the area furthest away, to be developed first, to allow a bund to go in, to allow monitoring to take place. And if it is found that it's not as anticipated, then certainly that would allow any future phase to be properly attenuated for at that phase. So yes, those applications would be considered on their merits and would have appropriate conditions attached at that time. And it would be, in my view, legitimate to actually require even retrospective additional works to the acoustic attenuation that's proposed here if it was necessary to allow a further phase.
Tom?
Thanks, Chairman. I know the area well, but I'm concerned about things that we've done in the past, or the council has done in the past. And I can recall when the houses at Downs Way, in between Downs Way and the cycle path at the other end of the estate were built. And, everybody who bought a house there, it was in pure sight of the Unioil factory, which is a 24-hour operation. And lo and behold, within a few months of moving in, folk were continually complaining to environmental health about noise, smell, etc., etc., etc. I mean, it should be a case of caveat emptor. I'm sort of with Alistair on this one. I think that it's all very well for the developer wanting to exploit the site there, but if there's going to be an issue for the people who buy the house, it's actually be for the developer to address, and not the folk who already have legitimate businesses there. And it's all very well doing sound surveys through the day when you've got all the background noise that goes on, but I certainly know from personal experience when the Wolseley factory in Trequeer was operating, you barely notice it through the day because of background noise with traffic and other noise. However, at night time, and particularly in the summertime, when guys would open the windows and doors to let a bit of fresh air in, then the noise certainly carried. And with the best will in the world, you can triple glaze the houses if you want, but unless you make them sealed units so folk can't physically open the windows on a warm night, then the noise is going to enter. So I'm very much with Alistair on this one, that I don't want to see legitimate businesses have operated for years, perhaps being forced into taking measures just because we've allowed somebody to build houses there and we haven't made the developer pay.
I'm going to agree with you, Thomas. The noise at night, as I say, we tried to restrict it out to the point that the deliveries came before, I think it was 10 o'clock at night, because the noise during the night, if it did happen to get delivery during the night, the noise was utterly, it was far noisier than what it would be during the day. So, as I say, I'll take that in there. What have we got here? Alice?
Thanks, Chair. Well, if we go back to, as far as I'm concerned, I take the point that David's making, but sort of it being inappropriate and incompetent, to be sort of trying to, work with addenda or adding stuff on at this moment in time. My concern is not to do that. My concern is much more basic and fundamental. Either, I mean, if we go back, Chair, to the history, for want of a better term of this, and we had a previous condition, 7, which talked about BS 4142, and eventually that went, in fact, to appeal, and I personally feel that the reporter's comments in repelling that appeal at that time were very much in point. Now we've got this particular application coming forward. What was then condition 7 is basically now condition 6, if my understanding is correct. In my view, it's quite basic. Does this application meet the requirements in terms of condition 6? I personally don't think it does. And I think at the end of the day, the stakes are such that, if we get this wrong, we may very well finish up getting it spectacularly wrong, and which will not ultimately benefit either, as it were, the Class 5 industrial estate, the occupants of the Class 5 industrial estate, or the people, who have been asked ultimately to live in these houses. And therefore, on that basis, Chair, I will move that the application before us at this moment in time be refused on the basis that it does not comply with the terms of condition 6.
David?
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to what Councillor Geddes and Councillor McCaughtrey were saying. In planning terms, would it be fair to say that what you're actually saying is that it is not considered that the matters submitted in respect of condition 6 of planning permission principle 13P3036 in terms of the proposed layout and the noise attenuation measures would result in an acceptable residential environment, recognising the legitimate uses of the adjacent industrial estate. And that way, in policy terms, that's basically saying it's contrary to LDP policies. It would be OP1A, which is on the amenity, and OP2 in terms of the layout and design.
That'd be a much more eloquent and in-point way of putting what I've said, Chair. Never too proud to accept betterment.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Tom made the point about installing acoustic glazing. Yes, you can do that, but that only protects the people within the home. We would hope that in future residents would be able to enjoy the garden, the outside environment as well. And the noise affects the outside garden, and can it be protected by acoustic glazing?
Jim? Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I've found this probably one of the most difficult applications I've ever had to consider. There's the living together with an industrial site and all it entails in terms of employment with good quality housing and good quality of life. I felt the site visit was extremely useful, and I take Alice's point about the fact that the wind was blowing the other way. I did feel that the noise mitigation might be sufficient for the layout which was illustrated. And I felt that very much on balance, because I do share the same concerns that other members do, where you have an industrial site next to residential. If we get it wrong, I think there was no doubt the last application was the correct decision, and the reporter said as much. I felt that in this particular application, notwithstanding any future applications will obviously have to be treated on their own merits, but I felt that very much on balance that I would go with the recommendation and would move that.
Yeah, I'll second that then. Yeah.
Chair, it was just you've beat me to it. I was going to second Councillor Dick's proposal there. I think one of the things that gives me some form of comfort is we are getting some bunding putting in, because currently there's nothing. I think it's an improvement. We have the school there just now, which if you actually expand the business, you could actually cause a noise nuisance at the school, and we would need some sort of attenuation there anyway. And I do find comfort from the fact that in phase 2, 3, or whatever the phases are that we have, that we can revisit any sort of noise attenuation scheme and look to improve it if required. So happy to support Ian in that.
Right, David?
Thanks, Chair. I've got an issue with this compressor that's used by Kelwood Engineering every now and again, and saying that we should not consider this part of their routine operations. But if they bring it in every maybe 2 or 3 weeks, albeit it's an outside contractor that owns it, and that, to me that's irrelevant. It's something that Kelwood Engineering use. And if they use it on a regular basis, maybe not daily, but in 2 or 3 times a month, have we got the right to say if it's noisy, as it is at the present moment, that they should bring it back to here for permission to use it? I would have thought that was something that we should consider at the present moment. It says in here it should not be considered part of the routine operations. But if they call it in every now and again, surely that should be classed as an operational noise, if you like, that they are going to have every now and again.
Richard?
The reason we've said it's not routine is we haven't seen it on site in the visits we've been there. We looked at the noise from the compressor and how it would affect the existing houses at Heathhall just now, and we looked at the noise, how it would affect the proposed houses with the barrier in place. The reason we've said what's trying to explain there is that the owner and the operator of the compressor is not Kelwood Engineering. It would be an independent contractor. It would technically probably be them that's making the nuisance, if there was one, from the use of the compressor by operating it in the manner that was suggested, which was basically under full load with the vents open. We would suggest if he was having to operate it in that manner, he was using the wrong piece of equipment. He should be using something more suitable, and considering he's coming into an area to bring with him suitable attenuation so he doesn't annoy existing properties, irrespective of the proposed development. He's got a duty as he comes on site not to cause a nuisance. Does that explain? No.
Jim, did you walk back in again?
Please, Chair.
We'll go to the vote.
Thank you. Ivor has said that future phases of this development will certainly be brought back to the committee. If the application is granted, we cannot bring back the 10 or 12 houses in the south of the site, which are in direct line of sight of the silos and are not protected by the embankment. If you look at the map, you can see them. These houses are not protected by the bund.
Can you clarify, Jim, what you're on the map?
Chair, the bund ends to the east, it ends there at the red spot. If you draw a line from the current silos, it covers these 10 houses. They are in line of sight.
Ivor?
Chair, I think it's as Councillor Geddes said earlier, the wind took the noise away. Now, if it was coming from the northwest the last day, southwest would take it away to the northeast, which has no housing on it. So we currently usually have a southwesterly wind in this area, or a southerly or westerly wind. So unless you're getting an easterly, which is very seldom that we do get easterly winds, any noise should be getting blown away, because the silos are at the eastern end of the main building. So although they might not be covered, the actual wind direction should take most of the noise away.
Tom, with this system, we'll go to the
Yeah,
vote.
with the greatest respect to Councillor Heathhall, the planning committee has no say over the direction of the wind. The wind will go wherever it
That's
wants.
what I'm saying, I'm not a meteorologist, so. Right, no work. Have you got the vote, Lucy?
Okay, we have a motion put forward by Councillor Geddes and seconded by Councillor McCaughtrey, and to refuse the application on the basis that it is not considered that the matters submitted in respect of Condition 6 of Planning Permission in Principle 13/P/3/0362 in terms of the proposed layout and noise attenuation measures would result in an acceptable residential environment, recognising the legitimate uses on the adjacent industrial estate. As such, the proposals are considered to be contrary to local development plan policies OP1A and OP2. And we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Dick and seconded by Councillor Martin to go with recommendations in the report subject to conditions, to therefore approve the application. Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Drybrough,
Motion.
Councillor Geddes,
Motion.
Councillor Hislop,
Amendment.
Councillor McCostry,
Motion.
Councillor McComb,
Motion.
Councillor McKee,
Motion.
Councillor Syme, Councillor Thompson,
Amendment.
and I can confirm that the motion carries with 6 votes to 5, and the application will be refused on the basis of the reasons given.
You get Jane and that. Somebody go get Jane. You get Jane and them in, please. Item 5 on the agenda, New Abbey Corn Mill, New Abbey, planning application for reprofiling of garden ground and installation of granite boulders along the boundary 16/1880/FUL. We've got Mary Mitchell speaking this one. Just whenever you're ready, Mary.
Good morning. We'll look at the slides first. The site is located centrally in New Abbey. It is in a prominent location within the conservation area. The corn mill itself is a Category A listed building. At the moment, the southwestern boundary of the corn mill site is defined by a beech hedge. There is also a cherry tree on this boundary. The cherry tree and part of the hedge are being damaged by large lorries trying to make the right-hand turn towards the sawmill. So I'll just point with the thing. So that's the direction that the lorries are having trouble getting round that corner. The corn mill site sits lower than the adjacent public road. It is proposed to remove a 13-metre section of the existing beech hedge and to replant it further into the corn mill garden. It is also proposed to remove the cherry tree and to place 10 granite boulders along this boundary. So this effectively will widen a section of the public road, and it will also create a solid barrier to protect the new hedge. You can see here there is some reprofiling of the garden in the corn mill building to be done as well. It's intended to train the new hedge to cover the rear half of the boulders, which will soften the visual impact of the boulders. The boulders are to be set into concrete, which is then to be seeded in grass, and the concrete should not be visible. These are the photographs of the site. So this is the main road going into New Abbey. That's the corn mill on the right. And the road that you can see on the right there is the U214N. And that's the boundary hedge on the left. The silver birch on the left is to be kept. The cherry tree a little further up is to be removed. There was an application for tree works where no objection was raised to the removal of that tree earlier on in March. You can see there's some erosion of the public road there. You can also see temporary fencing and the damage to the hedge. Again, you can see the damage to the hedge there. This is at the junction between the two roads. These photos are taken from within the corn mill garden. The visual impact of the proposal would not be significant, but it is considered to enhance the character of the conservation area. The current situation with the damaged hedge and the temporary fencing is not very attractive. There would be no impact on the setting of the Category A listed corn mill building. Archaeological interests at the site would be preserved by the Archaeological Watching Brief. All in all, the proposal is recommended for approval. A number of the issues raised by third-party representatives are considered out with the scope of this application. The effectiveness of the proposal to improve traffic manoeuvrability around this junction is not a relevant planning matter.
Many members, points of clarification? David?
Could we go to the first photograph he showed, please, and tell us what direction the traffic's coming from? Right in there. Are you looking at traffic coming from the Dumfries side, turning right in there?
The main issue is apparently large lorries going towards the sawmill. So they'd turn right at the corn mill building, which isn't an issue. That junction's not a problem. It's the next junction up where they turn right, again.
Right, could you show us that picture of that junction, please?
That's the closest one I've got looking in that direction. I've got one looking in the other direction.
In the other direction, I think we see the damaged hedge. That's it.
Yep.
Now, if the lorry's coming from the bottom up the hill, how is it knocking that hedge?
Apparently, the lorries come up the road, and because just behind where I've taken that photograph, there is a stone dike, and the lorries can't make it round that corner sometimes, so then they have to reverse, and that's apparently when they hit the hedge, and when they reverse, they can realign so they can then get round the corner.
Okay, thank you.
Other members?
Can I just ask about the observations that were made by the swept path analysis, the roads people? The consultation, it doesn't seem to stack up with the roads consultation, what's put in the report. The additional observations of the roads people say that that this, I quote, this proposal may not eliminate future damage. I mean, why have we not been told that in the report? I would have thought that was maybe relevant so that we could actually discuss whether or not it was going to achieve what it was asked to.
The need for a planning application is not really relevant. It's what's being considered is whether this proposal would comply with the policies which are listed. So how would it affect the character of the conservation area? How would it affect the listed building? How would it affect tourism in the area? Road safety is one of the issues, but the Roads Department have come back and said they have no objections in regards to road safety. The swept path analysis drawings were drawn up by the Roads Department by the request I think, of the community council. So it isn't strictly relevant, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Chairman. That's fine.
Any other members? Patsy?
Thank you. I'm just looking at that picture and where the Herries fencing is with the gap in the hedge. Could you just tell us where the boulders would be proposed from there? And that tree that is in the foreground, that one is remaining, or is that one going?
The tree in the foreground is the cherry tree, which is to go.
Oh, right. And the silver birch is the one behind then, is it? The little one?
The tree behind it is a silver birch, and it's to stay. Right. So I'll just point with the red thing to show where, which section. It's about a 13-metre long.
Oh, me.
It's about a 13-metre long section of hedge is going to be removed, and just underneath the hedge are where the boulders are going to be located. So from about here, it'll go round to about there. So it'll include the damaged section and a section to either side. I'll show you on the plan as well. So the green section is where the new hedge is to be replanted. There's a red line there as well, which shows where the cherry tree is and the old hedge. So that's the cherry tree there, and the old hedge runs along there like that.
The boulders, relative to where the hedge is at the moment, how much further in are they going to be?
It varies. It's a sort of a crescent shape of extra road is going to be created. At the widest part, it is 1.4 metres in.
Any other members? Archie, Andy.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering a wee bit clarity. Maybe it's a question for Mr. Barrett later on. At 2.4, the New Abbey Community Council has no objections, and I can see the A, B, and C are clearly no objections, but then D and E seem to contradict that. Is there any reason why that? Any comment on that, or is it something you want me to ask Mr. Barrett personally?
The Community Council raised positive and negative comments to the application. I had emailed them to check that they had no objection, that they were raising no specific objection to the application, and that was.
There is a speaker for the Community Council. I'm going to be speaking, so I take it you could ask the question then, Andy.
I think what I'm trying to get at, Chair, here is this is a statutory consultee, and it should be a minuted decision of the Community Council. And I'm trying to find out if we've got a minuted decision of the Community Council, because they're either raising no objections or they're raising objections. They can't. It shouldn't be under no objections, I would suggest.
It's just no. It's a consultee. It's speaking as a consultee.
Yes, on behalf of them, and I'm asking them if it's but we'll ask him the question. Yeah, thanks, Chair. No problem.
Davey.
It's just, Chair, just to ask, was the alternative access considered where the lorry went more into the, well, towards the Criffle, what used to be the Criffle Inn, and turning sharp right there? Was that too sharp a turn for them? Rather than using that road there, goes up into the village and turn sharp right.
David?
Chair, it's really just to clarify that the application here is not to try and solve an existing roads issue. What this is, it's an application by Historic Environment Scotland looking at a mechanism to actually try and better protect the curtilage of their listed building. If there are roads issues which are causing longer term concern, really that's something which is going to be referred to my colleagues in the road department, where they could actually see if there's some mechanism for them to improve it. This is really an application to try and protect and enhance the existing curtilage.
Based on that response, surely roads should have been looking at alternative access.
But that's not a matter for this committee and this application, I'm afraid.
No. Reading a prepared statement on behalf of Jeremy Brock, President of Dumfries and Galloway History and Antiquarian Society. And you've got 3 minutes, Ralph, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
As you've said, I'm here representing the Dumfries and Galloway Naturalist Antiquarian Society. You don't see us very often here. We were established in 1862. We're very worried about this development. And then while it seems for technical and planning reasons you're concentrating on a tiny little bit of hedge and a tiny little bit of road, the ramifications of this potential destruction are far wider than a cherry tree and a piece of road. We find it amazing, actually, that Historic Environment Scotland should actually be paying for this development. It is a traffic problem. And while the constraints that you work under as councillors in this committee, it is a wider problem than just a cherry tree and a hedge. The access to the woodyard and the construction, they're taking 42-ton trucks, 40 feet long. There are no pavements. Nowhere in this report is pedestrian safety mentioned. Even the roads section seems quite happy with it. There are no pavements. There are no place to put pavements. This area is probably the biggest tourist draw in the southwest of Scotland, New Abbey, and the environment of the village. It's a massive tourist draw. And you're ignoring the well-being of tourists. You're ignoring, according to the report, you're ignoring the well-being of the population because you're turning a blind eye to safety. It's a tragedy, and the society is really concerned about it. As it says in Mr. Brock's submission, Dr. Brock's submission, New Abbey is one of the iconic historic villages of Dumfries and Galloway. Perhaps Galloway's prettiest village, said John R. Hume, the author of Dumfries and Galloway, an illustrated architectural guide. Sorry, excuse me.
30 seconds to go, Ralph.
Sorry?
30 seconds to go.
Okay, right. I've lost my piece of paper. Quite frankly, it's a horror. It's got to be looked at in greater depth than it has been. It has been within these reports. And I know you constrain reports. Consider this. The Corn Mill is a Category A listed building. The Corn Mill is also part of a scheduled ancient monument site, which includes the Corn Mill, the mill pond, the lathe.
Could you wind up, Ralph, please?
The curling pond. The site lies within a conservation area, an archaeologically sensitive area, the Nith Estuary.
Could you wind it, Ralph? Could you wind it up, please?
And the Solway Coast Regional Scenic Area.
Right.
This is a sticking plaster to a larger problem which has got to be considered.
Thanks very much.
By this council and the government, because it's a national issue. The destruction
Thank you, Ralph.
Built environment. Thank you, Chairman.
Anina Hutton, please. And you've also got 3 minutes, Anita, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's no clear need to build up the ground level inside the garden and place boulders along the boundary. There's no clear need to fell the cherry tree, and most of the information you've been given about the tree is incorrect on the plans, on all the documents. Removing nearly half of the undamaged hedge that you saw in the photograph is unnecessary. The proposal does more damage to the visual amenity of the site than the HGVs have so far done, and will not protect the site or enhance the area. The potential for vehicles to leave the road, which has been mentioned, endangering HES staff and visitors to the corn mill, is overstated. Where vehicles have entered the HES site is beside the bridge on the other side of the road as you come into the village, and has not resulted in any proposal to place boulders or barriers. The area of the garden below and behind where the boulders are to be put has no visitor access. If it was deemed necessary, the HES staff could be protected by maintenance, landscaping changes that made maintenance reduced and could be carried out when these great big 42-ton trucks are not passing by, which they do 2 or 3 times a day. The boulders will not necessarily protect the replacement boundary hedge. The team leader Rhodes commented, and I quote, "If a boulder is struck by the wheel of an HGV, it is liable to simply slide backwards into the garden. They need to be secured by some means and be butted tightly together." The latest drawings, the section that you've got, shows only a minor alteration to the concrete foundation and the addition of a small area of gravel haunching behind. The long wheelbase vehicles take a line as close to the boulders as possible. Repeated contact is likely. Movement of the boulders will damage the new hedging planted immediately behind, and the new detail of the gravel haunching behind the boulders doesn't provide suitable growing conditions for the establishment of a new hedge. It's a muddle. Neither will the boulders protect replacement hedging from the oversale problem and reversing, which you've heard about and seen the gap in the hedge. When the HGVs fail to turn the corner in one go.
You've got 30 seconds to go, Nina.
Historic Scotland have acknowledged that they may have to continue to replace the hedging. So this is no solution. They state that temporary fencing will be in place until the new hedge is sufficiently tall and thick to provide a proper boundary. With continuing damage, it seems probable that unattractive temporary fencing will continue to be a permanent solution of this important site.
Can you wind up, Nina?
The felling of the cherry tree and the setting back of the boundary will make the remaining hedge towards the main road more vulnerable.
Can you wind it up, please?
Yeah, last sentence. This is the narrowest part of the road and damage is already apparent there. You've seen that in the photograph. This section of the boundary will suffer damage and the birch tree will then be closer to the lorries.
Wind up. In your seat, members may have questions. Members? Can you remain in your seat?
Sorry, I would just like to ask, I mean, there is a problem there, so what's your solution?
I think roads need to look at it again, as has already been suggested by a councillor. It is a traffic problem, and it needs to be looked at again. Alternative access. There is one type of lorry only that does this damage. The big lorries that you see on the roads with the tree trunks that come and bring the timber from the forest can manoeuvre around this corner without any trouble at all. They go in one smooth movement. It's the long lorries, the 42-ton curtain-sided lorries that go and collect the chips. They were introduced about 10 years ago and started doing damage from the moment they started being used. That type of lorry that goes in twice a day that does the damage because they find it so difficult to get round this right-angled corner at the top of that slope. There are alternatives to that, I'm sure, but there's no evidence that that's really been looked at. The attitude that the council have taken over those 10 years is that these lorries must get through. But you can get articulated versions of those curtain-sided lorries. I mean, you see them. I don't see why, with the same capacity, but they can move around the corner. I don't see why those can't be used. So different vehicles could be looked at, different working practices at the mills, which means that such large quantities of chip material doesn't have to come out. Used to come out on flatbed trucks in bundles. but a chipping system was introduced without any need for consent. And it's only after that that this problem has occurred. But there are alternative access.
We can only go with the application that's in front of us today. Any other members? No questions? No. Right, thanks, Anina. I made it on your seat. Could I have Martin Robertson? Martin Robertson, please. And you've got 3 minutes also, Martin, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
I've got a double measure, so I was told.
Oh, yes, sir. Sorry. Good.
I'm objecting to this application both as a local resident and also as representing the architecture.
Martin, can you get you've got 3 minutes on your own speaking here, and then you've got 3 minutes on behalf of the Architectural Society.
Well, it's
Just
designed as
continue
one
through.
statement.
Right, we'll just do one. Right, you've got 10.
I'm objecting to this application both as a local resident and also as representing the Architectural Heritage Society of Scotland, of which I am a trustee and the chairman of their National Cases Panel. I'm objecting on the valid planning grounds that it will cause unnecessary and unacceptable damage to the character of New Abbey Conservation Area and to the setting of the Category A listed building, New Abbey Mill, of which it forms a part. There is no argument that this is an important site. It has every possible category of protection short of a national park, and that may well come. The argument lies only in the degree of change proposed. Does it preserve and enhance, as the legislation and planning policies require it to do, or will it dilute and limit the recognized qualities of the building and the area? The applicants and the planning department say that what is proposed will preserve and enhance, and I am suggesting that it will not. Two subjective views, seemingly one as good as the other. But do not presume that the view of those tasked with the protection of our historic environment is, of necessity, the correct one in all cases. Views can be very different when the property is one's own, and Historic Environment Scotland owns one side of the hedge, the council the other. You may ask what right I have to hold a different view from these bodies. I became a principal inspector of ancient monuments and historic buildings in 1978, and I have spent a great deal of time since then in assessing and adjudicating on just such cases. This case concerns how best to repair the long-term traffic damage caused by changed local work practices, apparently requiring lorries of a larger type, which began to cause damage to the mill boundary about 15 years ago, and which continued despite the Highway Department's attempt to cure the problem by widening and restructuring the road. This later work, done without any local consultation, led to a major breach of the hedge caused by highways pushing the road surface right into its base, which only encouraged lorry encroachment. What Historic Environment Scotland are now proposing is the removal of approximately twice as much hedge as the size of the current breach, and its replacement by a series of large granite rocks, together with temporary fencing, while the new beach hedging grows behind them. The rocks have to be anchored in reinforced concrete, not usually considered to be an appropriate material for introduction into ground recognized to be of archaeological sensitivity. The beech hedge has been a feature of the character and setting of the mill since it last worked in 1948. It and the cherry tree, which had at least 3 objections to its removal and is currently flowering prettily, but already condemned to removal by reason of inappropriateness, appear prominently in Historic Environment Scotland's earliest photograph of the site from 1962, some years before it was taken into guardianship by the state for preservation for future generations. It is my contention that more work is proposed than is strictly necessary, as the tracking diagrams have demonstrated. It remains unclear to me why a simple granite curb at a reconstructed and reconfigured road verge would not suffice, so that the hedge could simply be repaired and replanted behind it and the cherry tree retained, instead of this major work, which will take some years to mature, then only with a rather different appearance. There is some irony in the fact that the revised local development plan main issues report is currently at the local consultation stage. This includes revised wording and policies for the protection and enhancement of the character and setting of listed buildings and conservation areas. In main issue 3, Creating Places, the principles which appear in the Scottish Government's Creating Places and Designing Streets are described. These will be incorporated into the LDP and are of particular relevance in this case. Designing Streets has 6 policies, the very first of which is street design must consider places before movement. In the case of New Abbey Mill, this is not being done. Movement is being given a clear priority over place, transport a clear priority over people. This case is another example of the incremental damage being caused by the continuing lack of so many of the conservation area appraisals, including New Abbey's, without which it is extremely difficult to make detailed planning policies work. In conservation areas and near listed buildings, place should most definitely be given priority over movement, as it also supports the Council's third strand of its economic development strategy, tourism, and if it is not followed, will lead to damage and degradation of some of our main tourist draws. This is the underlying reason for my objection to this application, and I urge this committee to take cognizance of its own policies and refuse it.
Thank you, Martin. If you remain in your seat, in case members have got any questions. Members? Nope. Right, Mary, turn to your seat, Martin. Could I have Peter Barrett on behalf of New Abbey Community Council, Statutory Consultee. And you've also got 3 minutes, Peter, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you. We do not wish to see any encroachment into the outstanding heritage that our village enjoys, but we accept that the present situation cannot continue. We support the sawmill as a valued employer within the village and would not wish to unduly affect their trade. The council, on balance, decided to support the application, although it was not a unanimous decision. Our initial response to the application was to ask for further information to assess just what the effect of the realignment of the road edge would have on the ability of HGVs to access the sawmill, which is the cause of the problems that brought this application about. We were subsequently provided with swept path plans. The report on the swept path tracks, as produced by Dumfries and Galloway Council Roads Planning, for 40-ton Arctics heading towards the sawmill, expressed concerns as follows. The first was that the tracks indicate the vehicle may not be able to complete the manoeuvre around the corner and have to reverse to realign itself. This essentially reflects what happens on occasion at present. Secondly, the line of boulders will act as an effective restraint to Arctic wheels, although they may not stop the rear overhang of an Arctic should it reverse towards the boulders, i.e. a manoeuvre known to have caused problems and damage to the hedge in the past. See from the photographs. Thirdly, irrespective of what the tracks indicate, if the existing hedge is being damaged because some drivers need to take a line whereby they cannot execute the turn in one go and have to reverse, then this proposal may not eliminate future damage, as the councillor mentioned earlier. It's possible, this is back to my comments now, it's possible for an Arctic to carry out a manoeuvre in a continuous movement, although to do this it's necessary to override the verge at the Corn Mill boundary and come perilously close to the edge of Church House on the opposite corner, just behind the hydrangea there. However, it's not an easy manoeuvre and unfamiliar drivers can easily get into problems, as is evident from the damage that has been caused to the Corn Mill boundary and indeed to the structure of Church House. Like roads planning, we are not convinced that the proposed measures will guarantee to solve the problem. Some of the swept path options show that it would be necessary to remove a section of the mill pond retaining wall in order to complete the manoeuvre safely, although it's not part of this application. The Community Council seeks reassurance that any further projects required to reduce the impact on the Corn Mill boundary and Church House and the mill pond retaining wall
Got 30 seconds to go, Peter.
be treated holistically by the Council and not left to individual organisations to attempt in piecemeal fashion. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Andy?
Thanks. Good morning, Mr. Barrett. I think you said the minuted decision of the Community Council was to offer no objection. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Fine. David?
Is Church House a listed building, sir?
Say again.
Is it Church House? He called it up on the right there. Is it a listed building as well?
It's a category B, yes.
Ivor?
Could you just clarify, is it the Arctics that are causing the problem or fixed bodied lorries that are causing the problem? Because one person said Arctics could get round, and you're saying that Arctics are the ones that are causing the problem.
It's mostly the Arctics, yes. There's two types of Arctic. One is the large 42-tonner or 44-tonner, whatever they are, with the three-axle rear end and quite a considerable overhang.
which access the sawmill quite regularly, as we heard. They are the ones that tend to cause the problems because it needs an experienced driver to get round there. It's very unusual that the first timer will make it round there and they'll get into an awful mess, have to reverse, and it's the reversing back that causes as much trouble as anything into the hedge to get their cab round the top. They're very close to the church house on the other corner, on the right-hand corner in the picture as well, which you can't actually see in that picture. And that's been struck on numerous occasions as well. There's evidence, there's lumps of stonework missing. There are other articulated vehicles that can get round, as Anina mentioned, which are the timber lorries use them to bring the raw timber in, as it were, which are, they're called a something and drag vehicle, which are, they're articulated almost in the middle rather than just at the front, and they can sweep round without any problem at all, and do so. The rigids that tend to go around there tend to be smaller and can make it, but it's the whatever length they are, 42 feet as well, I think, aren't they, or some huge, great size. They're the ones that cause the problem.
Thanks, Chair. I wonder, Mr. Barrett, if you could help me, how many vehicle movements per day on average are there? Have you any idea?
I haven't anything, I'd be guessing. It's certainly several. It's not a rare occurrence, this. It happens at least daily. Some of the other objectors may know the answer to that. I don't.
I think they do. Else? No. Thank you. Peter, you may return to your seat. Members, now in session. Dom?
Thanks, Chairman. I think it's fair to say the Community Council was a bit divided on this one, that they can see the benefits of the sawmill, but they can also see the damage to conservation area. But what's become apparent this morning is there are matters raised by the objectors, and I think questions asked by members of this committee, which I don't think they're getting the answers that perhaps a site visit would give. This is virtually an island where this corn mill sits, and I think that members would gain an advantage from a site visit to actually see in the flesh what the problem is. So we're only seeing one side of the problem here, we're not seeing the other side, and that may well give members a perspective. And in that case, I would recommend we make a site visit.
Any other members? Ian?
Yeah, knowing the area, I would certainly agree. I think a site visit would be worthwhile.
A site visit? So, is there anybody objecting to if we don't go on a site visit? Yes, it can be fitted in. Alistair.
Chair, I'm minded to say we determined today, although I'm not fiercely in favour of it, but I would remind the committee that we would have to get the site visit in and another committee meeting.
Yes, it can be arranged. Can be arranged, Alistair.
Election.
That can be arranged.
Right.
Davey? You have some? No?
I recognise the difficulties we've got, but I think trying to fit in a site visit and another meeting in the next fortnight is asking too much.
David?
We did actually discuss the possibility of one of these applications going for a visit and what would happen with the relevant Director of Communities, not Communities, Lorna Meehan, yeah. And her view was that we should actually be able to arrange a visit and probably the same day an actual decision before this council administration disappears. Obviously, what I would have to say is, are you going for a visit to see the issues which are pertaining to this application, or are you wanting to go and see the issues which are to do with the roads and Arctics and whether they can get round the corners and things like that? That is not a matter for this committee. So if that's why you're wanting to go for a visit, I would have to advise against it.
Tom?
No, I think it's very obvious by questions being asked by Councillor McKee, Councillor Gilroy, one or two others, that they don't get the perspective of how the wagons are addressing that corner. So we're looking at the planning application, but you've got to take the planning application in context. And with all due respect,
Tom,
I realise there are...
that's a roads issue.
No, I'm talking about the planning application. We've got to have a look at the planning application in context on why this is being brought forward by the Environmental Historic Scotland. So that's the reason. Another thing we'd point out, I noticed number of members are saying, oh, well, we've got elections coming up. That is irrelevant. Every planning application should be treated on its same merits. If it's good enough at a previous meeting to have a site visit, it should be good enough on this occasion as well. The fact there's elections in 2 weeks' time should have no standing in this. Now, let's have a bit of good governance here. I don't want members rushing through things just because we've got an election coming up.
David.
Can I just ask the question, why is the roads, access is the big issue, and why is roads not part of this application? I'm sorry, but it's the width of the road that's causing the problem. If that road was double the width, you wouldn't have an issue. So why are roads no part of...
Chair, we're going back in debate. You've got a proposal here.
We've got a proposal for a site visit. Is anybody otherwise minded? Jane?
I take this extremely seriously. I've been clearly reminded by officers that I'm to consider whether or not this preserves and enhances the conservation area. I think I've got enough information in front of me to decide whether or not this will preserve or enhance the conservation area. So I propose we don't go on a site visit.
I'll second that.
Andy?
Just for clarity, the issue of the tree has already been dealt with. Roads is not a planning matter, am I correct? In that case, then I'll support Jane.
Right, we've got a... Andy second. Tom got it. Tom.
Okay, I've got a motion forward by Councillor McCottry and seconded by Councillor Blake to go on a site visit. And I have an amendment by Councillor Maitland and seconded by Councillor Ferguson that there is sufficient information in front of members today to determine the application, and therefore there will not be a site visit.
Right.
Okay, Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Dick.
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCottry.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
I'll abstain, I can't make my mind up.
Councillor Syme. Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witts.
Amendment.
And I can confirm that the amendment carries by 10 votes to 5, and therefore members will determine the application today.
Members? Jane?
Right, I'm perfectly clear that large granite boulders set into concrete against a Class A site and against this conservation area does not comply with Section 64 of the Planning Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Scotland Act 1997. And I don't think the authority has paid special attention to preserving or enhancing the character and appearance of the conservation area with these particular proposals. So I'm proposing that we do not agree with the recommendation.
Ivor?
Chair, I think one of the things I can remember when I used to go down to New Abbey for the feed mill, which is further along, granite is one of the most used stones in that area. I believe Criffle's granite as well. So that's the sort of reason. Big boulders are a feature of a lot of the stone dikes down that way. I actually think that to preserve any further deterioration of the site, I think we should allow this to go ahead, and I'd move approval.
I'm sympathetic with Councillor Maitland. My view is, if that was my garden ground, I'd involve the police because it's criminal damage to property. And we shouldn't be simply moving boulders along and moving the hedge until there's enough room for large vehicles to go by. If there's an issue, but criminal damage, it should be dealt with. And we shouldn't be, as a planning authority, accommodating criminal damage and continued abuse. And if it comes to the Roads Authority being persuaded to put a weight limit or a vehicle limit, that's another measure for another day. But I certainly wouldn't be supporting. I have no difficulty with the proposal, but I think fundamentally there's a flaw because there's criminal damage being conducted and we don't seem to be addressing that.
Jim, did he?
Yes.
It was also just to second that. I agree that it does absolutely nothing to enhance the area. There certainly is an issue there, and it's something that probably could be looked at, but I don't think this is the remedy for it.
Remember? Alistair?
I'd like to second Councillor Hislop's proposal in terms of the recommendation. I would refer the committee to the section E of the grounds for objection, where the objectors invite us to consider the economic benefits of tourism. It's a tricky one because it also points up the council support for economic development. So we have a balancing act to do here, but in my case, I feel that it's more important that we consider economic development, and the potential risk to the sawmill should we go against this recommendation.
Any other members? No,
the applicants are charged with looking after this building for the people of Scotland, and it's their considered opinion that this is the best move for them, or they wouldn't put this application in. So I think I would reluctantly have to say, well, it doesn't sit very easily with me. I would have to go with their considered opinion.
Now, members, vote.
Yes, but I can.
David.
I can check with Councillor Maitland as to whether or not the grounds that I had scribbled down were really that. Were you wanting it just to be in terms of Section 64 of the Planning Listed Buildings and Conservation Area Scotland Act 1997, or were you wanting to actually mention LDP policy HE2 as well? Right. So basically, you're saying that the granite boulder set in concrete within the grounds of this listed building in a conservation area, it's inappropriate. And yeah, okay, now we can get wording for that.
Now, Lucy.
Okay, got a motion put forward by Councillor Maitland and seconded by Councillor Dempster to refuse the application on the reasons given by David, and an amendment forward by Councillor Hislop and seconded by Councillor Witt to approve as per the recommendations in the report. Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Blake?
Motion.
Councillor Dick?
Amendment.
Councillor Drybra?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes?
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy? Councillor Hislop?
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor McCoughtry?
Motion.
Councillor McComb?
Amendment.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Syme?
Motion.
Councillor Thompson?
Amendment.
Councillor Witts?
Amendment.
And I can confirm that the motion carries and the application will be refused.
Thank you, Lucy. We go into item 6 in the agenda. It's Peelhouses Farm, Lockerbie, planned application to develop land without compliance with condition 1 of planning permission in principle, 13/B/4/0154, condition relating to time period for commencement of work on site, and conditions 2, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 25, 28, 29, 31, previously attached to planning permission in principle 09/P/4/0117 for erection of an internet data centre, use class 4 business units within a technology park and a business centre, horticultural research and commercial centre, visitor information centre and associated infrastructure, landscaping and open space 16/1217/PIP. And we've got Robert Duncan leading on this one. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. The case officer can't be present today because he's on annual leave, so I'm just going to cover for him as best I can in doing the slide presentation. First slide that you see, this is a location plan. The site extends to more than 100 hectares. It's obviously quite substantial in area. As you can see from this slide, hopefully it's located in quite close proximity to the northern edge of Lockerbie in the region of about 750 metres. Looking at the site more closely, it's presently agricultural land, roughly 1.8 kilometres from east to west and 900 metres from north to south at its longest parts. The next slide is an aerial photograph. It shows land cover quite well, so mainly kind of pastoral agricultural land. There is some moorland, you'll notice, to the east there, and patches of woodland as well, together with watercourses and a couple of water bodies as well. There's reference in the report to a submitted master plan. The concept master plan shows the data centre primarily to the rear of the site, so on the right-hand side, if you like. That data centre would be up to 250,000 square metres in area, and that's carried forward from previous applications, obviously. Existing site sections, this shows this both in photographic form and also in a more conventional cross-sectional plan form, although that's annotated with vegetation. The report makes reference, and this is looking west to east from left to right, makes reference at one point to 3 distinct parts of the site based on topography, and I think this shows this quite well. You've got a narrow western sector which rises gently from west to east. Then you've got a wider central section which rises more steeply from west to east to a ridge line, and that's culminating at a maximum height of around 220 metres above ordnance datum. Then you've got an eastern sector approximating to the moorland, which falls gently from north to south. This is showing the proposed site sections, again west to east, and from top to bottom you're looking at a time scale. So you've got year 1 at the top, and then that progresses as you go down. Moving to the actual photographs, you might want to make reference here to the location plan on page 49 of the papers. This is a view from the track leading from the B723, which is the road immediately adjacent to the site's western boundary that you can see on that plan. So this is looking in a broadly easterly direction. It's towards Peelhouses Farm itself. So those are the white buildings you can see there. The next photograph is panning to the right from the same viewpoint. So this is looking to Lockerbie House Wood, which you can see in the middle ground there with the agricultural land in the foreground. This is looking towards the south, so this is looking back in the direction of Lockerbie, and you'll see the line of the B723 public road on the right-hand side. So that's slightly into the sun, so you can't see too much detail, but that follows the line of the road. And the final picture is looking towards the northwest, so this is actually looking out with the application site towards, I think it's pronounced Bishop Clough Farm. Looking at the key points in the application, or rather the report, planning history is at 1.6 and 1.7. The description of the proposal by the officer has been summarised at 1.8 and 1.9. So that explains what's involved and what the application is hoping to achieve, if you like. Essentially, it's a consolidation of two previous applications, which were permissions in principle using section 42 of the Act. Key determining issues appear in the report, and you may find the paragraphs at 4.4 and the bullet points at 4.5 quite useful in just crystallising the issues that the case officer has gone through and looked at and made reference to in the body of the report. Members may also wish to note there's reference to the original section 75 planning obligation, and that's at 4.17 of the report. That was regarding a sustainable transport financial contribution of £250,000 prior to the commencement of the construction of any buildings on site. There was a clause as part of that section 75 obligation which made it binding on successor applications, such that we don't need to enter into a new section 75 obligation in this case. Finally, the case officer has drawn a conclusion at 4.18, and members will see the recommendation is to approve the application subject to 32 conditions as listed, and I'm happy to answer any questions arising.
Members? Stephen?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually on section 4.17 with the £250,000 contribution. I'm conscious, I mean, we've had a similar application which we looked at in terms of how little progress had been made since the original application had been granted in terms of in principle. But this one, this is 09, and I'm just curious as to the value of £250,000 then as compared to now, given the length of time where no development has taken place. So it'd just be maybe interesting to see if that could be reflected in some kind of index linked or proportionate kind of value.
It's a fair point, Chair. I mean, normally with Section 75 obligations, for example, where they make reference to a restoration bond, not in a case like this, for example, a wind farm, you would have that sum of money index linked. With this case, I honestly couldn't tell you whether or not that £250,000 is index linked or not, but I take the point, given that that first arose in 2009 and we're now in 2017, you'd expect with index linking the sum of money to actually be greater to equate to the real amount as it was then. But as I understand it, again, I can't say for certain, but my understanding is that Section 75 obligation would still be £250,000. If members were otherwise minded to seek a different sum, allowing for index linking since then, and I think that would be within members' gift to do that, but you would be looking at a different decision then. You would be approving subject to the conclusion of a Section 75 obligation with a different sum of money, and also the conditions as well as that.
Stephen?
Yeah, well, I'm just conscious that part of the reason why we're looking at changing the attached conditions originally is because obviously we've now got the LDP, etc. So it might be prudent then to review that. I mean, obviously I'll listen to what other members have to say, but I think it would be worth suggesting to maybe include that as something that we do, so we're actually tying in something reasonable and reflective given the time period, because I think we can only indicate advisory time periods now. So, I mean, it could be 2027 before anything happens, and then £250,000 might look quite minuscule by then. So, so I think it would be responsible for us to actually tie that into something more meaningful as time goes on.
Tom?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Councillor Thompson's saying there. I think it'd be a good idea. I mean, this is rapidly turning into cloud cuckoo land, never mind anything else.
Thanks for your contribution, Tom. Anyone else? Hands of members now. Archie?
Chair, this is the third time it's been up in front, and I agree with Stephen that you know, £250,000 and 209, you probably get more than 2009. What you do now in 2017 for £250,000. I think if we can go with the recommendations with the option to have the Section 75 agreement refined, then that would be a way forward, I think.
You can do that. Yeah.
Yes, Chair, basically you could do that. It would just be the normal requirement that we have that 6 months to conclude Section 75 revised to update and presumably perpetually update the index linking of the previously agreed sum. Would there be a need to change any of the conditions, Robert? Or I think they're okay, but just in case.
My understanding is the conditions would be unaffected, and what you're seeking is to make an allowance from 2009 until now, the date of the decision, to index link that amount, so upgrade the £250,000 to what it would be now if you had been index linking it, if that's correct, Chair.
Andy?
Just so I'm absolutely clear what Robert's saying there. So what we're intending doing is upgrading that 250 to today's value and then index link from there on. That's exactly what we're going to do here. Thank you.
Right, members agreed on that?
Members have agreed to approve the application as per recommended by the report, subject to conditions, and with an option to go with the section.
David?
Sorry for clarification. We cannot agree to issue the permission unless and until the applicant has actually entered into a revised Section 75. So it's a willingness to approve subject to the completion of a Section 75 within 6 months or such other period as a reasonable period as agreed by the appointed officer, and subject to the conditions and set out in the report.
Yep, got that now.
Yep.
Right, go on to item 7 on the agenda, council offices, 16 High Street, Annan, applications for A, planning permission for change the use of part ground floor of council offices to a public library, 16/1805/FUL, and B, listed buildings consent for internal alterations to part of ground floor to bring about the change of use to public library, 17/0008/LBC. You've got David speaking in this one. Are you ready, David?
Yep, the case officer Carla is actually still on holiday, so that's why I'm dealing with it. The town hall is at the west end of Annan and faces east, fronting down the high street. It's just a closer in view of it. Being able to zoom into these photos is not particularly useful, but I'll try and highlight it. Basically, the original part of the town hall is this section here. That was the entrance into it. There's a meeting room there and some of the other meeting rooms. This is the extension part. So for those of you who know it, you go through the doors there, and the reception is up here with a number of meeting rooms sitting off here. So the area which is being looked at is really this part, the sort of reception area, and then into this part of the original building. And this just sets out, not you'll be able to make it out at this distance, I'm afraid, but what the intention is to do is this area here will become part of the library. That's for reference in local books. A hole will be knocked through here into this area here, which is the part of the meeting room, and that will become the children's area. This area here will become the cyber centre. And just going back to the previous picture, you'll see that the meeting room was quite large. That would actually be partitioned off so that you would have 2 new interview rooms here. So just some photos of it. That's looking back to the main entrance to the extension part, and you've got the interview rooms. Excuse me, interview rooms are just back there on these parts here are the interview rooms, where the next photo shows a hall would be knocked through to the original part of the building. This is in the original part of the building, was looking down towards the main entrance doors. This is the part here that would become the cyber centre. This door would no longer be in use, but you'll notice there's a condition requiring that it be retained in situ because it was part of the original building, which is of course listed. That's the door on the left that would be retained. This is inside the actual meeting room, which would then be partitioned off. That's looking down to the front of the building in the same area. So this part here would be the children's area. And this is just a stock photo, which I was able to find this morning because I realised there was no external shots. This is the main original entrance here, and you'll notice there's a condition that was requiring originally to be a video entrance facility added on there, and there's a condition required to be put around the corner just so that it's not affecting adversely the appearance of the listed building. But other than that, from the planning perspectives at least, the applications are recommended for approval.
Members? Andy?
Where's the disabled access?
I don't actually have it on the photo, but basically the extension part here has a disabled access into it. So that's where people will be able to come in there. For going in there, because of the step, I'm not so certain you could get in there, but you would be able to get in where everybody would be going in anyway, is through the main door there. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, Mike?
I'm saying if we don't set an example, who is going to set an example? Because we should be having maximum access for people with any form of disability or infirmity.
Well, as far as I'm aware, the entrance for the library will still be using the existing disabled access, because you'll need to get into the reception part to be able to use it. So there is already an existing disabled access in there.
Ian?
Yeah, it's along a similar point, but from time to time the town hall is used for evens out with sort of core opening hours, and I'm just wondering then what happens if it's a more sort of management and operational issue, but could it be maybe taken on board that if something's going to be done out with the sort of normal opening hours of the office, that access to the town hall, if it's being used, is preserved for those who maybe have access issues? Because clearly that would be an issue, but it's operational, I suppose.
Members agree? Agreed. And as I have no other further business other than to say I think this is the last meeting of this council, so I'd like to thank everybody for that they've done, and some of them will not be here after the next year. So, as I say, I must admit I've enjoyed myself being in the chair, etc. And thank everybody for all the support that they've given, the contributions that they've gave to the debate. It's been very good. So, other than that, and I wish everybody all success as are standing again.